Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full-time and have a collection of hundreds of monster ecology and strategy videos on my channel, including a complete A to Z list of all the monsters and the core monster manual. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing as I upload at least twice a week. So, what is a Deepspawn? Why are they so scary? Settle back, grab a snack, we're going to get deeply nerdy. Let us set up the encounter, shall we? A little narrative. Let's jump back in time a little bit as our band of adventurers that we've been previously introduced to. Seska, the cleric of Bane who grew up on the hard streets of Luskan. Her friend Tolmus, the arcane investigator from Candlekeep. Their gnomish companion Norn Hara, the Gondite master of tools from the island of Lantern. And the local hero, Mal Valoris, bard of the College of Valor and devotee of Tempest. Proud descendant of the Netherese Arcanists from Waterdeep. On their latest money-making venture, they are on their quest to investigate an almost ruined keep that has been swallowed by the edge of a forest. On their way there, they stop overnight in Red Larch, spending some coin on a lot of drinks brought for locals who can tell them anything about the keep. One man, a ranger, informs them that for years the place has been suspect of being the lair of a fully grown green dragon named Felfane, who made that area of the forest particularly dangerous. But nobody has seen the dragon for a couple of years at least now. Could be that the long-standing hostilities between the dragon in this area the dragons in the area have claimed another victim, and good riddance to bad rubbish, to which the whole tavern raises a glass. Fairly confident they were not going to run into the dragon's lair, the companions were still very cautious on their approach to the abandoned keep, camping out and climbing trees to watch the place for quite some time. But aside from a particularly large hawk they thought was a griffin at first sight, the place seemed uninhabited, at least by anything that ventured out during the day. Mal was eager to get closer to the place, get the job over and done with, and get back to Waterdeep. He had spread the floor plan map of the keep out next to the big log they were sitting on, his customary skin of fine Thayan sweet wine and dried apricots next to him, and the group decided against going in the front door, which seemed to be overgrown with vines anyway, and instead go through the broken wall on the west side, where a tree had been uprooted and fallen through the masonry. They figured this was probably something like a bear lair or something in there, but they could easily handle that. Stopping once at the tree line, they put the bulk of their travel packs down next to a young oak tree, readied their weapons, strapped on more armor, and checked their spell components before heading in. They didn't notice the eagle go into the keep through the hole in the roof. Inside the keep, there were pools of stagnant old rainwater on the cracked stone floor, once finely fitted and repeating pattern of light and dark, with piles of fungus sprouting tapestries that had long since fallen off the walls and rotted. The whole place had a stink to it, a chemical smell that irritated the back of the throat and drowned out any other smells. The darkness was pierced by the magical illumination gleaming from the powerful mace of disruption held aloft by Tolmus, ready for any potential undead to come creeping up on them. But the place was quite another kind of lifeless, not so much as an ooze or a giant spider in the first wing of the old structure. All the party were experienced enough to know that this likely meant that something was keeping them away from the place. So the further they went in with no encounters, the more wary they became, checking everything with such care that the pace slowed to a crawl. It was half an hour later that the four finally opened the dwarven-crafted double stone doors to the main hall of the keep, where they expected to see a banquet table and many ornate chairs with a raised platform and another smaller table with two anterooms on either side of it. What they found, though, was a much larger pool of water, and rising up from it, piled up in a great heap across the raised platform and spilling over into the side chambers, was a brilliantly glittering king's ransom of gold, silver and copper coins, gems, jewellery, weapons and bits of armour suitable for nobility. A dragon's hoard. They were speechless, and several moments passed with each of them frozen on the spot, listening and peering around intently, before finally Mal broke the silence with a hissed whisper. "Surely, that must be an illusion." He took a coin from his own belt pouch and tossed the Waterdavian copper nib across the murky pond and into the treasure pile with a satisfactory clink. Tolmus first took a triangular silver shard coin and tossed it into the pond. Then he dipped his glowing mace into the water, trying to see how deep it was. "No more than past the knee, I think." Norn, turning to look at the eldritch sage from Candlekeep, asked, "You mean waist deep for a gnome, I take it?" They all shared a smile. Seska couldn't help but think about how many urchins she could keep off the streets of Luskan with the wealth she was looking at. And surely Bane was sending her a sign she was on the right path of her fate. Staying as close to the edge of the water as they could, they made their way across, 2 on each side, and carefully stepped into the slippery mound of loose coin. From this close, Seska could see a palm-sized and emerald-green dragon scale, loose and half-buried next to the ornate, gold-inlaid breastplate that was clearly elven and very old. She bent down to retrieve the scale, fascinated by dragons as much as she feared them. What happened next was a blur as suddenly the coin seemed to explode into the air as several things, some sort of tentacles, possibly a spell, thrust up from below and immediately attacked all of them. The strike against Mal was horrific and brutal. One moment he was checking his cape to see if the stagnant pond water had soaked into it. The next, his entire face was nearly torn away from his head by a thick tentacle that split open like it was a fang-filled wolf's maw and just bit right into him with tremendous strength, ripping itself free with a spray of dark red blood. Mal simply staggered back, falling across the hard metal pile, a silver axe blade biting into his side as he clutched at his shredded throat and tried to scream, but only a frothing gurgle came out of his mouth, rapidly filling with arterial blood. He desperately reached his other hand for a vial of healing serum within easy reach inside his vest pocket. Tolmus managed to bring his mace across to slam a tentacle to the side and turned to see what creature had started to chant the words of a spell so very close to him. Seska leapt to the side and lost her footing, landing face front first and sliding down into the slimy water, the sounds behind her suddenly muffled. Norn sidestepped the attack directly at him from 2 different directions and accurately guessed that this was not a separate creature. It was one large monster under the coins, as the whole pile was actually moving from something pushing its way up from out underneath it all. He saw Seska go down next to him and leapt to assist her balance, only to get half dragged down into the water himself from the larger woman, and then something chomped down very hard on his leg and he was suddenly flying through the air, cracking into the stone wall and landing in a pile of broken timber, the old tables, and bones of his forearm stuck out of his badly broken limb. The adventurers managed to rally somewhat in the next few moments, but the beast was not alone, as a large eagle suddenly attacked as soon as Norn got free of the woodpile and was raising a potion to his lips to at least give him back the use of his own throwing arm. Within less than a minute, Seska was sobbing as she was moving as fast as she could back the way they came, the weight of Norn over her shoulder and her front stained with the blood pouring out of a terrible wound at his chest from the bird's 4-inch long talons and dagger-like beak. Her last glance back revealed a great ball of rubbery flesh, many unblinking eyes, and the gruesome sight of her 2 companions being eaten by the thing, like it was split open, a fang-filled maw on each side of it, swallowing them up, its insides churning an abomination of goo and spine-covered tentacles squirming around pulsing organs that bore no resemblance to any other living creature she knew. And so she fled back to the edge of the forest, immediately entreating her god to return her friend back to life. Meanwhile, back in the keep, the Deepspawn finished consuming the 2 dead humans and began the process of replicating them inside itself. It had been centuries since it had last ate a humanoid of the surface world, and these 2 were particularly powerful, skilled in arcane arts, martial combat, intimately familiar with the locations, people and culture of the land for many miles in every direction. This was indeed a fortunate encounter for the Deepspawn. It began to wonder why it had been so long since it had come all the way up to the outside world. When the duplicates were ready, the beasts swelled their worm sacs with fluid, and they burst forth into the stagnant water, fished out a second later and dropped onto the coin bed by a couple of tentacles. The Deepspawn extruded a pair of eye stalks and looked them over, sizing them up, and retrieved the regurgitated remains of their garments and picked up a few suitable items from the dragon treasure to equip them. They stood a little shaky at first, then busied themselves dressing and trying on the new gear. The one called Mal turned to the other, named Tolmus, and laughed. Looking the Deepspawn over and peering into a pair of eyes, he coughed and brushed his cape back and then looked back over his shoulder. "Do you want us to go after and kill the last one? She can't have gotten far." A tentacled mouth raised up, and the strange voice of the Deepspawn replied,
"No, my child. It has been 3 days. You are not small and quite complex creatures. I need you to go and hunt down some meat for me. These rotten timbers are an insufficient meal to replenish."
The spawn which to all appearances are Mal and Tolmus, then bowed to their master and made their way out and into the forest to find some game, eager to return and discuss their creator's plans for them. The Deepspawn are extremely dangerous aberrations not native to the prime material plane, but perfectly adapted to it. They are 15-foot blubbery and rubbery spheres that slither around using 6 thick and very strong tentacles, 3 of which are also their fang-filled mouths that they can lash out and strike with a bite equal to a giant constrictor snake. The other 3 tentacles can also lash out once per round with the force of a giant octopus. They have at least 40 long, retractable eye stalks that they keep well protected, not normally extruding more than 4 at a time. They have the ability to consume any organic material to feed themselves, but otherwise have a completely alien physiology and a highly complex nervous system distributed throughout their body with a considerable intellectual capacity. Make no mistake, while it is a monstrous creature, each Deepspawn is also a calculating and chaotic evil genius. A single Deepspawn can make a vast area dangerous even for alert, well-armed adventurers. Their mottled hide is purple and brown. They tend to rest underneath some sort of camouflage nest, reaching through the pile with their 20-foot-long tentacles to make it seem like the prey is being attacked by multiple smaller creatures at first. Their arms are far more dexterous than they appear, and the Deepspawn makes full use of captured items to arm itself, including magical martial weapons, even making use of a shield to defend itself. They prefer heavy axes and maces simply because their high degree of strength means that they can handle the additional weight quite easily. A Deepspawn weighs about 28,000 pounds, but can move at 30 feet per round and even dash around on its tentacles while they are still using them to engage with their victims. Deepspawn speak Aquan, Common, Draconic, Giant, and Undercommon, as well as Deep Speech. They use their tentacle mouths for speech, and their voices sound like horrible, high-pitched piping. But when the deep rumble is behind it is from the many lung sacs inside the creature's huge body. Deepspawn are voracious creatures that crave intelligent prey. Despite their bulk and bizarre appearance, they are highly adaptable and patient opponents. They frequently dispatch their spawn minions to lure new victims to their lairs with promises of wealth and magic. A Deepspawn usually wields 3 weapons sized for medium creatures in its manipulative tentacles and bites with its jaws on its feeding tentacles. Feel free to give it a small selection of particularly brutal magical melee weapons to suit your encounter needs. A Deepspawn is proficient with all simple and martial weapons, but an opponent can attack a Deepspawn's tentacles directly. Each of them take about 20 hit points of damage before being taken out of action. Later, while restoring itself from combat, the Deepspawn recovers 2 hit points per hour as it regenerates and can regrow the severed limbs. Chopping off a tentacle reduces the Deepspawn's main hit points by 10 points taken away from its maximum hit points until the limb is restored. There are some good 5th edition homebrews of this monster in D&D Beyond, but they're not perfect. The one I am looking at is a challenge rating 17, a huge aberration. The stats are armor class 17, which is fine if the creature is mostly buried in a treasure pile, but as soon as it emerges, the huge creature should drop down to an armor class of 16. It has a dexterity of 13 and natural armor to compensate for its large bulk. It also towed down the hit points to 19d10 plus 126 for between 145 and 316 with an average of about 221 hit points. It should be immune to poisons, and being knocked prone can't be surprised. It has 120-foot dark vision and 60-foot blind sight, as well as passive perception score of 17. And it will typically have its area surveilled by other spawn who are watching the area in disguise. It has 17 strength, 24 constitution, 17 intelligence, 16 wisdom, and 10 charisma. It knows how to cast spells and fight with the skill of an eldritch knight. It can cast Hold Monster almost like a cantrip. I would roll a d6 to recharge the spell power on a result of 5 or 6 for the following round. The physical attacks for tentacles, jaws, or weapons are all plus 7 to hit. The tentacle slap does 2d8 plus 3 bludgeoning damage, and the target will be grappled. Escape DC is 17. Also, while a creature is grappled, the Deepspawn constricts it, doing the same amount of damage automatically each round the victim has not yet escaped. The Maw does 2d6 plus 4 piercing damage, can also grapple a target, or either kind of limb can use a weapon as well. The Deepspawn prefers to ambush its prey, and in combat it will attack until it grapples a target, and then uses other limbs to attack from the sides or the rear, giving itself advantage on the attack roll. It absolutely has legendary actions, so twice per round at the end of another creature's turn it can make a melee attack with a tentacle or a bite attack, or a weapon attack with one. Or it can exchange both of those attacks and instead cast an additional spell, including Hold Monster if it has it available. Otherwise, pick a spell from up to 5th level, and the Deepspawn has extensive arcane knowledge it has gained through probing the minds of adventurers and other creatures, including Drow and Mindflayer down below ground. It has previously digested and duplicated over its long lifespan. Duplication is clearly its most potent ability, and the applications of it are the reason why this creature is so dangerous. But there are limitations to its power. It can duplicate any creature it can digest as long as it is large or smaller. It takes 1 to 4 days to create the duplicate of the body of the original, which must be eaten entirely. The Deepspawn will typically tear it up and consume it using its tentacle maws. It can also form a temporary maw and digestive organs on in its main body when it is not in immediate danger, to more easily swallow the entire victim in one go. They cannot swallow a creature whole during combat. The first duplicate of a consumed creature is a perfect replica, except it emerges from the Deepspawn without any equipment, and it is completely loyal to the Deepspawn that made it. The duplicate or spawn has all the knowledge of the original, but it's a bit fuzzy. A Deepspawn can make further duplicates of that creature, but each time it will lose a fair bit of its authenticity, looking a bit lacking in detail, a copy of a copy. A Deepspawn can copy a lackey like a kobold many times until it has a small army of wretched, almost brain-damaged drones that merely look kobold-shaped. They're kind of horrific. Even the perfect duplicates struggle to remember specifics of their recent activities. However, they still retain their skills. They have to be a creature native to the plane of existence as well, and the control of a Deepspawn is through either issued verbal commands, magic messages, or via a form of telepathy. After spawning, a Deepspawn must wait 46 days before it can do so again, so it will typically do it in one big group. Typically, Deepspawn operate alone, at least 30 miles apart from each other in the Underdark. There is no law on their mating practices, even if they mate at all in any sort of recognisable way. They are after all aberrations. Deepspawn prefer to let their offspring fight for them, lairing in caverns, dungeons, or ruins amply protected by traps and guardian monsters, their spawn. If these defences are penetrated, the Deepspawn is usually found in a readily defended room or area, always with at least one or more escape routes, and it will definitely sacrifice its spawn to protect itself. It can always make more. Thankfully, most Deepspawn never venture up to the surface, so their primary enemy for the last few thousand years has been the dwarves, mainly. One of the darkest eras in dwarven history, and something they certainly do not talk about with outsiders ever, happened over 10,000 years ago in minus 9,000 DR, when the 8 sub-kingdoms of the great dwarven nation of Deep Xanatar tried to expand their borders in competition with each other. Each of these kingdoms was essentially a different theocracy of the dwarven pantheon. Skirmishes broke out, and then the bitter feuds erupted into open war, known as the Spawn Wars, for the heavy use of Deepspawn-bred warriors employed to bolster each side's numbers as a form of biological secret weapon, because Deepspawn are not immune to mind control, and they can copy the corpse of a dead dwarven warrior. It was a brilliant, if horrific, tactic, and the dwarves slaughtered each other. This was so long ago, the Durgar were still a shield dwarf clan and part of the civilization of Deep Xanatar at this time, engaged in a long-standing string of spider wars with the drow of Gualadirth. Xanatar was located beneath the lands of Arm, Tether, Kalimshan, and the Lake of Steam, collectively known as the Lands of Intrigue. It has a series of different ruins. The ones closest to the surface are part of High Xanatar, which was involved with a war against the humans of Kalimshan around minus 2,600 DR. Deeper down are the ruins of the 8 kingdoms, which are older, which are all but one of them was destroyed when the return of the clan Durgar, who had become a new race of after their slavery and transformation by the Mindflayers. But more on that when I make some more videos on the dwarves. Some other historical footnotes in the lore of Faerun involving Deepspawn. 75 DR, in the year of the clinging death, Moanda the Nightbringer hurls his forces and the creeping evil against the elven city of Sornil, blighting much of the surrounding woods. The magic of Miranda twists all life, both follower and victim alike, into corrupt monsters, including Deepspawn and shambling mounds. While the evil could not be destroyed, the high magic severed the creeping evil from Miranda and imprisoned the corruption at Sornil, soon to be called Dark Watch. This weakened the Darkbringer's presence on Toril, though it cost the lives of 32 elves, including 2 high mages, to sever and bind the power. So that's typical of elven high magic, that they often sacrifice their high mages to enact these very powerful spells. So there's precedent that Deepspawn can actually spawn from other creatures who are sufficiently mutated. 679 DR in the year of the Scarlet Sash, the Hilsifar is nearly destroyed by an army of Deepspawn-bred monsters emerged from the tangled, treacherous beast marches to the west. The Ak-Velar reinforcements of Cormanthir succeeded in dispersing the beasts by the first snow of winter. A small garrison of troops remained stationed at Hilsifar for the protection of the northern forest and the villages until Mithranor's fall. When used as a biological weapon through magical domination and feeding the controlled Deepspawn, the fallen soldiers of an army, the numbers can be quickly replaced by the spawned clones. But I assure you, the dwarves will learn about someone trying to do this, and they will arrive in force to stop anything like the Spawn Wars ever happening again. It's like a racial shame. Do not underestimate the intelligence of Deepspawn, or its ability to strategically create duplicates to infiltrate and form alliances or severe disruptions with other races who are its primary rivals in the area. You can easily reenact the storyline of like The Thing, the movie by John Carpenter, with this sort of a creature. They would much rather manipulate events to pitch 2 opposing groups against each other in the area than quietly expand their control in the shadows of war. Their spawn clones do not need to be in close proximity to their master. They can operate on their own, but are fanatically loyal to the Deepspawn. Not even magical means can force them to betray the Deepspawn, as they see that as a direct threat to their life. The Deepspawn is their parent, and they don't see anything wrong with what it's doing. They're incapable of it. Aside from their lack of memory, they are very hard to identify, as they do not appear to be aberrations. Personally, I give them some sort of an alien trait that is identifiable when they die by someone who knows what they are looking for, such as the blood turning green if exposed to silver or something like that. But that's entirely up to you. These are aberrations. They are supposed to have variants and quirks. Much like beholders, Deepspawn are not all the same, and both appearance and specific traits may vary, particularly their spell knowledge and their personal methods of invading and dominating their territory. They do have names and personalities. Please hit the like button if you made it this far. Subscribe if you like what I do. Check out my Patreon for some exclusive content and all the full scripts for these videos. Buy some merchandise. Wear your geek with pride, and as always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.